And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Welcome back to the Freedom First podcast, where we bring on experts and heroes from all walks of life to have in-depth conversations about the most important topics and issues our world is facing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Freedom First podcast. I'm your host, Blaine Smotherman, and today we have our co-host, Eric Kern. Today's episode is brought to you by Jeffries Firearm Training. Being able to protect yourself and your family is ever so important, but being properly trained is vital. If you are looking for firearm training and safety courses, make sure to contact Jeffries Firearm Training. Anywhere from intro and basic courses for men and women to classes for the most advanced firearm experts, Ronnie Jeffries will take care of all your needs. Make sure to contact Jeffries Firearm Training on Instagram at Jeffries Firearm Training or through email jeffriesfirearmtraining@gmail.com. Today we have on an exciting guest, Officer Ronnie Jeffries. Ronnie is a Central California native who is a local Kern County police officer, military veteran, business owner, and firearms instructor. Ronnie has spent time in the SWAT team, gang unit, as a range master, community relations officer, and patrol officer. As the owner of Jeffries Firearm Training, Ronnie instructs all levels of firearm training and safety courses. On today's episode, we talked about policing, police reform, building relations between police and the community, mental health, and firearm safety. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Officer Ronnie Jeffries. Welcome to the show, Ronnie. We're happy to have you on the Freedom First podcast for the third episode. So thank you for coming on. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. I'm excited to be here, excited to be a part of this podcast and to, have some fun answering some questions and see where this goes.
Yeah, and that's such an important issue, with not what you do in policing and, your firearm training business. So many important issues to talk about with the current climate right now. So we're excited to have this conversation today. On the Freedom First podcast, we do a segment called the Freedom Minute. And this is basically some rapid fire questions for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better and to kind of break the ice into our conversation today. So the first question is, what is your favorite band and song?
Oh, that's too easy. It's Nirvana, man. I'm a 90s grunge kid at heart, and my favorite song it's got to be Smells Like Teen Spirit. I mean, as much as Nirvana towards the end didn't want to sing that song, that's still, probably the most iconic song of the 90s.
I like you already.
Yeah.
All right, so
you can't argue with that one.
So our second question is going to be your favorite superhero and why.
Oh, man, that's tough. There's so many good superheroes out there. I'm going to have to go with the Hulk. I go with the Hulk because I think that at heart, we all have that inner rage inside of us that we all have to control. And at times we have to let it out because there are times where that side of us is needed. But what I like about the Hulk is that, he tries to use that for good. Even that hardcore, uncontrollable rage, he uses it for good.
I like it. Next question. And this one, I think we have, depending on what era you were born in, when you grew up, it could be a little different for some people, but who was your celebrity crush growing up?
Celebrity crush growing up. Holy smokes, man. I'm going to have to dig deep for this one. It's been a while since I've thought about a celebrity crush. So are we talking about when I was a little kid or something like that? Or are we talking about a young adult?
Young adult, 13.
Yeah, I agree.
That time. Yeah, we got to know that.
Oh man, Mariah Carey, 100%. Mariah Carey. Oh man, those songs. And then music videos, she was out of control, at least for my 13-year-old self.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
That was in the 90s, right?
Oh yeah, dude. 90s, man. She did that duet with Boys to Men. Whew.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
That music video was fire.
There we go.
Yeah, I can't eat the 90s. I was born in the 90s. Eric was born in the 90s. The 90s, so much good music, all the TV shows, the cartoons.
Yeah.
Pretty good era.
Yeah,
for sure.
I still think that, in my opinion, the 90s music was the best.
Yeah, for sure.
You had grunge that kind of swept the nation for a while. You had kind of the uprising of like actual gangster rap. You know, you had your NWAs and your Tupacs and your Biggie, stuff like that were kind of making a name for themselves, that had like good lyrical content and stuff like that. You also had like some really good metal and stuff that was kind of coming out.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm also a big fan of, like, you know, Panteras, all that stuff, Slayer, a huge fan of those guys. So,
Right.
You know, I just think that in general, like the 90s, as far as like music is concerned, was phenomenal. Like, I don't know if there's a better generation other than, you know, maybe like, I don't know, Elvis times, you know, you had some pretty gnarly stuff, the Beatles and all that kind of stuff was pretty awesome too.
Right.
All right. So question 4, if you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone throughout history, who would it be and why?
Man, if I could sit down with anybody throughout history and have a conversation. Now, is this somebody who dead, alive?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Anybody, like Jesus. It could be anybody.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say the Christian side of me says Jesus, because it'd be awesome to be able to, you know, just kind of get some insight into some things that I've had questions about throughout my journey in Christianity. Other than that, I'd probably have to go with my dad, just because there were a lot of things that after him dying, he was an unexpected death. So there was a lot of things that I wish I would have told him that I never got a chance to. And I would love to be able to just sit and have one more conversation and kind of just let him know, you know, like what's going on, how things are. Things are going to be great. And, you know, like how his grandkids are doing.
Right. I mean, that goes back, like, you know, you never know, you know, we have to take each day and tell those people we love that we do love them and have those conversations, because, you know, any day could be the last.
100%. 100%. Especially in your profession right now. Obviously it's a crazy time. I mean, obviously we don't want to think about that, but it's just the time and just everything that's going on is just insane. So
yeah, first responders, man, it's a tough profession for anybody. Right here in California, we have, you know, all these fires going on. So big shout out to anybody working fire department here in California. Those guys are kicking butt right now, and they're rocking really hard and doing good work, you know, trying to keep us all safe and keep this air quality as good as it can. You know, law enforcement, those guys are always out there doing what they got to do to keep us all safe and to, you know, make sure that our cities are protected and, you know, property's taken care of and whatnot. And then, you know, obviously our EMS brothers and sisters, those guys are out there making sure that, you know, our wounds get patched and that, you know, sometimes people get a second chance at life, you know, whether that be through, you know, bringing people back from, you know, overdoses or just going out there and patching people up that have been shot, stabbed, you know, and beat up. You know, I mean, they do a phenomenal job.
100%.
So last question of the Freedom Minute. If you were elected as president of the United States of America for a day, what would be the first thing you would do and why?
Oh, man, you guys get deep on these questions.
Philosophical.
Yeah, I was president. I don't know if I've ever thought about being president, because I know that's just nowhere within the realm of possibilities. And I hate to think about what I would do as like my first decision, because I feel like it would be like a selfish one, just because I'm like, hey, maybe like, you know, stop the ban on fully automatic weapons, because I think we should all be able to own those, you know, just because I'd really like to own a fully automatic weapon. But I don't know, man. I would hope that I would do something for good. I don't know if I could give you a straight answer on exactly what I would do, but I would hope that it would be something that would better all people and not people of, you know, one side of a political party or the other. I would hope that I could make a policy that would help change all of America and not just one side.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I mean, you being law enforcement and a local police officer, it's, I think you would obviously, you know, have a lot of different things, having that experience. So that would be super interesting, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And I think your background, I mean, obviously you said it's probably not going to happen, but I think you have a good understanding of everything going on. Kind of going in with that, what do you think, I guess, as far as being in the military and being an officer, how do those compare to each other? So what are the similarities and what are the differences, I guess? That's
a good question. Spending 8 years in the military, you get, especially during the years, so I was in from 2003 to 2011, which, you know, it's been basically during that whole time, you know, you have the war on terror, basically the biggest reason why I joined, you know, 9/11, you know, growing up and seeing that when I was a freshman in high school, sitting on my dad's couch, you know, he woke me up, showed me, you know, and then I got to watch the second plane go into the Twin Towers. And I remember him telling me, you still want to go in the military, you're going to go find out who's responsible for that. And you're going to end up fighting a war for it. sure enough, 3 years later, that wasn't far from the truth. The thing about the military is most people who go in the military, what they miss when they get out is that brotherhood. The men and women that you work with there, you build a bond with them that can't be broken. It's an amazing, amazing experience, and I highly recommend it for anybody. The friendships you make and the bonds that are forged in rough times are some of the most amazing things that can happen. You see people at their very best and you see people at their very worst, and that forges a bond unlike any other. The same thing is like that in law enforcement. We get to see people at their very best, and we also get to see people at their very worst. Sometimes that's your partners in law enforcement. Maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they just got on a bad call. Who knows what the circumstances are? But you also see just the general public on their, sometimes they're very best and sometimes they're very worst. I think that it's similar. You have the military and law enforcement. I think it's very similar in the fact that you build bonds with people through either good or bad experiences. I've developed friendships with people within the police department that I don't think could ever be broken. I think they're some of the best friends I've ever met. Phenomenal human beings, just good-hearted individuals. I'm honored to be able to call a lot of these guys friends, these guys and these gals. And it's the same thing in the military. I think that's the biggest similarity, is just that I hate to use the word brotherhood because a lot of them are men and women, but brother or sisterhood, for however you want to call it. But that friendship you build and those bonds that you forge are unlike any other. Differences, yeah, obviously there's differences. The military is it's a little bit more structured, I suppose. You get a lot less room for free thinking, I guess, because they have to train people to a standard, and that standard is kind of broad. So, things are very, hey, this is how you do it. This is why you do it that way kind of thing. More law enforcement, you kind of get you kind of get to, I don't know, I guess paint your own picture, for lack of a better term. They give you the intent. They give you what they want to see. They give you obviously rules and parameters on how to perform your duties. And then they kind of give you free rein to go do that. If you want to be a police officer who's super hardworking and is always out there, and he's, stopping cars for, violations like speeding or anything, any plethora of reasons that they stop people for, you can do that. You can also be that officer who goes and he just kind of does what he's supposed to do. He goes to calls for service and, he does his thing. You can do either one of those. And, generally it's going to be okay as long as you stay within the parameters and policies that you're given. So, I would say that they're similar. There are probably more similarities within law enforcement and military than differences. But I think the biggest similarity, like I said, is just the bonds you build with people and those friendships. I think that another difference is with the military, you don't get a whole lot of interaction with the civilian sector, whereas with police, that's pretty much all you do. Sometimes you develop friendships and bonds with people that you meet on calls, whether that's like a victim of a crime or it's just somebody that you meet randomly or sporadically throughout your day at work. You can meet a lot of cool people. It's pretty neat, the amount of interaction you get to have with the community. And if you try to, you can really use it for good, and it can be a lot of fun.
Do you think so? A lot of people that were in the military tend to gravitate towards going into law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, whatever it is. Do you think that's why? Because of that that tribal kind of bond that, you're basically in the military, you're with a platoon of guys, you're with a group of guys. Same thing in law enforcement, you're with kind of a sisterhood or brotherhood. I would assume that's why a lot of those military people gravitate towards law enforcement as well.
Yeah. I think that's one of the big reasons that, veterans decide that when they do get out, they want to transition to like a law enforcement or first responder type job. I think a big part of it is going to be that brotherhood or that sisterhood and feeling is like, I feel like I lost something and I want to have that again. And then this is the closest you can get on the outside. I think the other aspect, and maybe even more importantly, is the idea of being a public servant. I want to always serve. I knew from the time I was, 5-6 years old that I wanted to serve my country. Like I wanted to do something bigger than myself. And the military was the best option for me. growing up. And I think that when you get out of the military, you don't lose that sense of service and the sense of wanting to be part of something bigger than just yourself. So getting in law enforcement, getting into fire, getting into EMS, it's right there with it. And you might even be more of a public servant in my opinion, being a first responder. I mean, you are legitimately out there constantly with the public, serving them, protecting them, making sure that everything's okay. A lot of times you're the first one there, and you stay with them through maybe their worst day of their life. And you go through that journey with them, and sometimes you can help them to cope with things. And it's nice to be able to be a part of that. So I think that a lot of it has to do with the feeling of just giving back, always wanting to be a part of like serving our country. When you get out of the military, obviously I guess I don't want to say progression, but the next step would be, if you want to continue to do that, would be like law enforcement or being some sort of first responder. Yeah.
So, you talked about 9/11, and it's September 12th today. So we're just about 19 years, the 19th anniversary was yesterday for 9/11. You talked about 9/11 was a big thing for you. You talked about it with your father going to the military as a freshman. And we talked about that kind of that brotherhood and tribe of going from the military and how it translates to law enforcement. So you spent 8 years in the Army, now 7 years as a police officer, and you spent time in the SWAT gang unit. You're a range master. You spend a lot of time at community relations, and now you own your own firearm training. What was that story of going from leaving the military, I suppose, and going to law enforcement as a local police officer? What was that decision, and how have you gotten to where you're at today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say that growing up, I had no drive to be a police officer. Was not a job that I had ever even really considered. But fast forward to 2011, I got out of the military. I was working in the civilian side. I worked in a warehouse, and I really didn't like it. It was like I'm coming home every day. I'm covered in dirt because I'm loading trailers by hand. Not that it's not an important job, because I have I've built some of my best friendships in that warehouse, but it just wasn't for me. I knew there was something out there that was better and something that I was more suited to do. I just didn't know what that was at the time. And I never even considered law enforcement. Just wasn't on my radar at the time. Me and my wife had a mutual friend from high school who reached out and said that he was applying for a police department. And he said that he thought it would be a good idea if I did the same thing. And I was like, man, I don't know if that's for me. He goes, just give it a shot. They love veterans. I think you'll do great at it. So I said, hey, what the heck? I'll give it a shot. And I was super pessimistic through the whole process. I was like, it's not going to happen. They're going to DQ me for something, some small thing. Cause I didn't know what the process really was like. I was fortunate enough to get through the process and to get into the police academy, which was pretty rough. The police academy was 6 months of, good physical fitness.
How was the police academy compared to military training?
I would say for me, the police academy was harder because at the time I was older. So when I went into the military, I was 17. I was in the best shape of my life. So it was relatively easy for me. There were aspects of it that were obviously hard, but the police academy was harder for me because I was 26 and I'd had a knee surgery, and so it was harder for me. I wasn't at the time. I was really big into weightlifting and stuff, and then realized that they didn't care about any of that. It was more about calisthenics and cardiovascular endurance. And so it was good. I lost a ton of weight, got in great shape. And, but it was much harder for me personally than basic training was. But I went through that. I was super fortunate. I got through that. I was hired on as a police officer. Fairly early on, I was able to go to the gang unit, which was the best time of my career. It was an absolute blast. It was super fast paced, lots of work, tons of hours spent working, overnights away from the family. But it was all worth it. And it all felt like I was actually making a difference. So I had a ton of fun there. I was fortunate enough to also get picked up for our SWAT team, which has been an absolute blessing. It's been so much fun. I've met some awesome dudes, and I've been able to, I don't know, just be part of something that I think is so much fun. It really is. It really is like a little family within the department, and a ton of good people, really, really good people. Also been a range master, which has been probably one of the most fulfilling jobs that I've had within the department, is watching people grow as trained and responsible gun handlers, being able to help them on their journey through the police academy in multiple ways, but being able to help teach people how to shoot and watching them go from somebody who is either relatively nervous handling a firearm or has never handled a firearm, or even somebody who's semi-comfortable with firearms or have been holding them or handling them their whole lives, to be able to get them from day one of the range through our pretty strict qualification is actually pretty fulfilling. You know, watching them progress and seeing them get excited when they start shooting good, it makes me feel good, because I get excited, you know, thinking that maybe something I did or said was a small part of their success. So that's been awesome. Also been fortunate enough to work in our community relations unit, which, man, that's not a unit that I initially had ever thought about becoming a part of, but after doing it, I see the benefit. There's a huge upside to that unit. They get a ton of interaction with community members, and that's one of those units where you can actually explain what it is that police officers are doing, why they're doing it. You get to hear some of the public's, some of their concerns with different aspects of policing, and that's the best opportunity to be able to explain why it is that maybe there's. So if there's like a misunderstanding or something, you get that unique opportunity where you can just sit there and explain it. It's not at a call for service where you're thinking about, okay, well, I need to kind of get through this so I can get to the next call. It's not anything that's rushed, and you actually get an opportunity to sit there and explain. And a lot of times you get to educate them, and you walk away with a mutual understanding. They don't always completely understand, or they don't always completely agree with the reasons, but a lot of times at least they're there to listen to your side of things, and you can either walk away with a mutual understanding, or you can agree to disagree, you know? And that's the beauty of that unit, is you get a really unique opportunity to be able to influence the community for a really, really positive way. And you actually get to show them what policing really is. Because a lot of people think they know what policing is, but they have absolutely no understanding and no idea what this job entails. There is so much more to this job than I ever fathomed when I was getting myself into it.
So I guess today, with today's current climate and what's going on, a lot of people are demanding change, and you kind of hear that a lot throughout the news and what's going on. In your amount of time, your 7 years, what change have you seen in the department just in that span?
There's been a ton of change, man. There's been a lot of change within the department, and I think that's just worldwide. I don't think that that's unique to our department or even California. I think that that's a worldwide thing, or East United States. Policing is changing. It's a job that's always changing, though, because as crime evolves, we have to evolve. And as the world evolves, we have to evolve. We have to constantly be ready for change and constantly be ready and willing to adapt different things and different techniques, different ways of going about our job. But that's the beauty of it, is you're constantly learning. And I think that that's one of the aspects of this job that makes it fun, is that it's never the same. Nothing we ever do is going to be the same. You may go to the same call 3 times in the same night, but all those calls are going to have different aspects to them. And I think that the change that's happening is just part of this job, and it's always going to change, and we have to be able to change with it.
Yeah. So I guess, like, from my understanding, a few college courses in law enforcement, there was different eras of policing. So we're kind of moving on to, I guess, this new thing called community policing. Like, I'm sure you know a lot about that with community relations. How is that kind of transferred from the old style of policing, maybe back even or as early as the 90s, you know, that style of policing?
Well, that style of policing, it's a lot different. It's hard for me to speak of because I wasn't a police officer back in those times, and I wasn't even old enough to understand what policing was back in the 90s, you know, maybe in the late 90s or something like that, but not something that I ever really looked at. So their policing style was a lot different, where ours is more focused on how can we better serve the people in which we're here to protect. So, a lot of what we do is we listen to the community. We have community forums. We have a community relations unit. Like back in the day, that wasn't a thing. I don't think that many departments had community relations units. I guess I could be wrong, but I don't think that was really something that was pushed. Now that's almost becoming more important than other units. Even some of your units that weren't typically known for their interaction with the community, like your gang units and stuff like that, like they have a huge job within the gang unit aspect of things. Like their community outreach is huge. They're not just some gang unit that goes around and does their thing. They have a lot of different programs that they're a part of and different community events that they're a part of, which are just that. What we're all going towards is a police department that is here to serve our community. We take our community's concerns and we see what best way we can approach those concerns and how can we best combat these, crime rates and things that they're really concerned with. How can we best serve them? That's what community policing is all about, is like, what can we do as a police department to change to best serve the people that we're here to serve?
You talked about kind of the community relations, and it's become prominent in every basically different police agency. And so it's definitely a focus. Since you've been in 7 years, what are some of the specific things that you can actually talk about that are kind of some positive changes with the connection between police and the community?
Well, I think one of the biggest changes is just giving them an understanding as to what we actually do. I would say 90% of the general public has no clue what police officers really do on a day-to-day basis. They have no idea like what we're responding to, and that maybe what their tragedy is that particular day, or whatever the worst thing that's happened to them that day, and why, a lot of times the complaint is, well, why didn't you get to my house fast enough? What they don't realize is, maybe you just got done, dealing with a shooting where you saw somebody, die, and you were stuck on that shooting for hours and hours and hours. And then you finally get done with that. And then your very next call is to go talk with this person. And I'm not saying that they should feel bad for us or anything like that, because that is part of our job, is like, we have to be able to go from one thing to the complete polar opposite and be able to perform at a high level. That is what we do. That's what we're supposed to do as police officers. But being able to educate them on things like that, and to make them understand that maybe their call, not that it's not significant, but maybe let them know that there were other things going on that were maybe just a little bit more important at the time. And that's why we couldn't get out there. But the biggest part about community relations and community policing is just to be able to bridge the gap between the police and the community. And a lot of that's just education. They can educate us on things that they would love to see out of police officers, and we can educate them on, what it is that police do, how we operate, the different things that we can do to help serve them as police officers. And like I said, it's a two-way street, but we got to be able to have that open dialogue between the two of us before we can actually meet in the middle.
And that's where a lot of that dialogue in those forums come from. You get to hear their feedback, they get to hear your feedback, and you kind of adapt and make adjustments to kind of, best fit the needs of both of you guys. And I think that's super important. And as we move forward, we want to continue building those relationships and, connect with the community, because, there is this kind of talk about defunding police and reforming police. I think reforming is definitely, reforming and making better tactics and learning and adapting, but community relations, that stuff does cost money. It costs money to hold trainings. It costs money to hold forums. The talk about defunding police, what do you believe that would do to not just a police force, but also a community?
Ooh, defunding the police. Yeah, that's a rough one, man. The argument for defunding the police is, they basically want to get rid of police officers in certain situations. And they say that, you guys aren't best suited to handle, whatever situation it is. And we would like other people to deal with this, whether it be mental health professionals or, whatever the case may be. When you defund the police, now, depending on what the argument is, some of them want to defund they just want to take part of your budget away, and some of them want to completely abolish the police. But if you defund the police and you just want to take away part of their budget, what usually ends up happening is the first thing that gets cut is training. So your training budget usually gets cut. And that's with anything. Like, I don't think that that's just a police thing. I think that, or law enforcement, I think that with most jobs, if you lose part of your budget, your training is going to go away first, because that's usually going to take a pretty big chunk of your budget. After that's going to be smaller units like your community policing units, and then your other little units that kind of go around and help solve problems that the community's having, whether that be, specialized units or whatnot. But typically your training is what goes first. And training, in my opinion, has got to be at the forefront. That's got to be of the utmost importance within law enforcement. If you want good police officers, and you want police officers that go out there and make really sound professional decisions, training has to be increased. It can't be decreased. I think the issue that you run into with officers who make bad decisions is a lack of training. I don't think that they go out there with some sort of malicious intent. I think that what it is that they're not trained very well. And with more training, they can make better and sound decisions in stressful situations. And so if you end up defunding the police and they cut their training budget, all you're asking for is more issues, to be, potentially caught on camera, or, just police officers making, just poor training decisions.
So how do you go about that? So you're talking about maybe possibly even more training, which would obviously mean an increase in the budget, which I obviously agree with that. I think that's a really good idea. But how would you go about more training, and what would it be? Is it more so maybe hands-on things? Like, I've heard other people say, like, maybe all law enforcement officers should have like some sort of like jujitsu training, something like that. How do you feel about that, and how do we do that?
I think that's a great idea. I think that having training, and I think one of the first things that you got to look at is understand how to de-escalate a situation. If you can de-escalate a situation without making any sort of physical contact with whoever it is that you're encountering, I think that that's going to be first and foremost. If you can do that, then you can ultimately end a situation that could have turned bad. You could end it before it gets there. However, if inevitably there are going to be times where you're going to have to make physical contact with people, that's just the nature of the beast. At some point, police officers, they'll have to go hands-on with somebody for whatever reason. And if you can train them to understand that, like, hey, if you can train them to get to the point where they're comfortable with going hands-on with people and taking them down, whether that's through jujitsu or there's some other like a judo or just increasing their funds for defensive tactics and getting their defensive tactics instructors to a level where they can instruct their departments and get them proficient. I think that that's what you want. I don't think it necessarily has to be some certain discipline that they learn. I don't know if they have to go through like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or anything like that, but I think that having a basic understanding of self-defense and how to just be comfortable with yourself is huge. Whether that's jiu-jitsu or it's judo or it's just whatever their respective departments' defensive tactics policies and procedures are, just becoming proficient with those, I think, is going to be huge. And I think that that's going to decrease a lot of these issues that we see.
Yeah. I mean, I hear a lot of people kind of saying, well, why didn't that officer take him down? Or why didn't they shoot them in the foot or the arm? And a lot of those people might not have a tactical understanding or a situational awareness. Can you kind of provide that awareness and that situation that an officer is seeing?
Yeah. So that's one of the big arguments is you see an armed suspect or something like that, and they say, well, why didn't you shoot the gun out of his hand? Or why didn't you shoot him in the leg? Something of that nature. A lot of those people who say that kind of things have probably never handled a firearm. And if they have, they've probably never done much shooting. I teach firearms training on the outside. And that's one of the things that I talk about is everybody wants to have this notion that police officers are some sort of like expert marksmen or that they're some sort of bullseye shooters. And it's just not the case. Like, we don't get the opportunity, we don't get the time, the training to be able to be at a level where that's even in the realm of possibilities, is being able to, like, under stress in a scary time, be able to shoot the gun out of somebody's hand. at a level that I don't know anybody's at, especially when you're under stress. So it goes back to talking about decreasing budgets and whatnot. Like, I think that's another aspect of things that they need to increase is the amount of training that officers get with firearms, to be able to be comfortable with firearms. And, it's just one of those things that I think that the community's somewhat uneducated about. At least part of the community that says, hey, you should have shot the gun out of their hand, or you should have shot them in the leg or something like that. A lot of it's just being uneducated and never handling a firearm and understanding that, like, first of all, it's not easy to shoot guns. It's not super easy to shoot pistols or, rifles for that matter. And secondly, it's not easy to do that under stress. And maybe the scariest situation in your life to be able to, make a pinpoint shot, while physiologically your body's going haywire. So it can be pretty tough.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it's obviously the stress factor is probably a huge thing, especially you see all these situations that are going on right now. It's just, you can't even kind of fathom the stress that someone's going through. Just some of the instances you see just online. But I kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit from what we were talking about before. You were talking about how you go on calls and maybe you had just seen somebody die or had kind of witnessed maybe domestic violence or something along those kind of lines, pretty serious stuff. And then you have to go to somebody who maybe is kind of a lesser serious call. You're kind of flipping a switch, and that could obviously affect your mental health, because obviously everybody's human. Everybody has emotions. Everyone has feelings. So you're kind of trying to flip a switch immediately. How does that affect law enforcement officers?
I would say that it affects law enforcement officers differently. I think each one of us handles stress and stressors differently. You may go on one call and you just got done watching somebody, bleed to death because they just got shot. And then the very next call is like, you got to go take a burglary report. And you might not be in the best frame of mind to take that burglary report because you just watched somebody die. You may have witnessed them take their very last breath on planet Earth. And then you have to go, talk to somebody who just got their TV stolen and they're upset because you didn't get there 4 hours ago, and that can be tough. You do have to flip that switch. You have to understand that, like, to them, that TV being stolen is the most important thing to them. And at the time, you don't convey the message like, hey, I just got done watching somebody die. Because that's not what we're there for. We're not there to try to get pity or make them feel bad for us. We're there to do a job. And so you say, hey, I'm sorry. It's been really busy out there and we got here as fast as we could. But the mental health side of things is huge, man. It's, you see a lot of police officers who end up, relying on alcohol to try to ease the pain, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, because mental health is a huge issue. Going back to military, like they've done a really good job since, Iraq and Afghanistan, is educating veterans on mental health and helping them get through mental health things. It's been a huge thing. I think law enforcement's kind of struggling with picking that up now that, I'm sure over the last, 15, 20 years, we've probably had an increase in, law enforcement related suicide and stuff like that. So you really got to take care of yourself mentally. And I think part of that's physically as well. You got to have a good physical regimen because, for a lot of us gym rats, just going to the gym is a good stress relief. During COVID, it's a little bit hard because you got to wear masks and some gyms aren't open and whatnot. But we make do with what we got, whether you got a home gym or you just, go on a jog here and there. I think that taking care of yourself physically is probably the first step, to making sure that your mental health is in a good place. I think that having somebody to help you out, and I give a big shout out to my wife because she's my rock. She kind of gets me through any bad situations. We have conversations every night when I get off work or every day if I'm working days. And we talk about things that have gone on, anything that's bugging me, anything that's bugging her. And then, we have 1 hour, we talk about it. And then after that, we do our thing, we hang out with each other. We do a lot of stuff together. So I have to give her a huge shout out for always being there and helping me through anything that I'm dealing with. Cause I'm not immune to anything, and nobody really is. A lot of guys try to hide things away. And, I've told people in the past that mental health is it's like a bucket, and everybody's bucket is different sizes. And at some point, if we don't deal with the stress that we accumulate over the years, that bucket fills up. And when it does, it can, overflow and just blow up. And then that's when you see a lot of guys have a lot of issues, and those issues vary. there's one extreme where, maybe somebody hurts themselves, and then there's other sides where they hurt somebody else, so I think being able to deal with that stress before that bucket fills up is huge, man. I think being able to help officers find out whatever it is that they need to do to help empty that bucket, whether that's just being a little bit, having a more open line of communication with their spouse, or just a better network with their brothers and sisters in law enforcement. And I say law enforcement, but this is all first responders, because we all have stress. We all have stressors. EMS deals with a lot of stuff. Fire deals with a ton of stuff. And I mean, anybody really that has stress within their job, which I would say is the majority of people, are going to deal with some sort of issues over time. And I think that if you don't have some sort of outlet, whether that's like a hobby or it's, some sort of other passion that you pursue, or whatever the case is, if you don't have that, man, I mean, it can get really bad for you really fast. And a lot of times that you don't even realize it until it hits you.
I'm seeing a lot of that, like different reports and stuff since COVID started back in the beginning of the year, a lot of these kind of things that people relieve stress with are gone, whether it's attending sporting events, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's, whatever that is, going to the movies, whatever. A lot of that stuff we can't do right now. So you're seeing a huge spike in the last couple months of suicides, divorce rates, and things like that. And as a police officer, you have to have your A game. You're dealing with the community. You're dealing with people's lives. So, are there, and I think maybe some people don't necessarily realize that, because you are dealing with those things. And military has a big thing. Law enforcement deals with it a lot. All first responders. Are you guys, are there plans and are there programs in place to help you guys deal with those things? You talked about your wife is your rock. A lot of people, some people don't have that. And I've heard a few people that lost their dads and their husbands or wives. They said, I wish they would have talked to me. I wish they would have sat down and let me know what was going on. And they didn't. Do you guys have those programs in place?
Yeah. So a lot of departments, what they're doing is they go into what, at least what our department's called is like a peer support unit. And they kind of reach out. Now, the thing is you never know when somebody's dealing with stress, because, in a lot of these type A type jobs, saying that I'm stressed out or saying that I'm having issues with my mental health or that I'm not feeling right, it's almost looked at as like a sign of weakness, especially in years of past. Now, we've kind of gotten away from that in today's world, but definitely in times of past, it was almost looked at as a sign of weakness. So, and I think that that's kind of carried over a little bit for some people. And so they're a little reluctant to admit that, hey, man, I'm having issues. And so they don't want to say anything. They don't want to reach out. So it makes it hard. I mean, you can have a lot of programs in place. You can have all the greatest programs in place, but if somebody's just not feeling it and they don't want to talk about it, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it is really tough to be able to just look at somebody and read them. And I think that it's more incumbent upon their brothers and sisters who are around them, because we're going to know each other better than most people, whether that be their spouses, their kids, their brothers and sisters, or it's their brothers and sisters in as first responders, or any job for that matter. We get to know people. We get to know what they're like on their good days and their bad days. And I think it's incumbent upon us to look at them and evaluate them and realize, like, if somebody's having a bad day, like, reach out. Does it take any time or does it take any effort to just pull somebody aside and be like, hey, dude, or hey, lady or girl, whatever. Hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling today? Because you seem off, and if you just something like that, something as simple as that can go leaps and bounds for some people. Maybe they're just looking for that. Maybe they really want that, but they don't know how to go about asking. I think the burden is on us to be able to reach out to our brothers and sisters in our jobs, because a lot of them they're never going to look for the help. It doesn't happen a whole lot. If they do, great, kudos to them. And I would urge anybody that is feeling that way to reach out, get the help you need, because it'll do nothing but good for you. However, for those people who are a little bit more reluctant, or maybe they're just waiting for somebody to say something, they just want somebody to notice, I think it's incumbent upon us as their brothers and sisters to, just reach out every once in a while and be like, hey, dude, is everything okay? because we're going to be the ones who know something's off. It may not seem so earth shattering that we're like, oh, they might hurt themselves, but something is as easy as like, you know what? Hey, this guy, he's usually like kind of the jokester around here. And today's been real quiet. I'm just going to, I'm going to invite him to coffee, or I'm going to take him out to lunch. I'm just going to see what's going on today.
So recognize those signs.
Yeah. The little signs, man, they're there. I've had a couple friends over the years that took their own life, and the signs were there. I just didn't see it. I played it off as like, oh, he's just having a bad day, or, whatever. He's just not wanting to talk or something like that. And, fast forward a little bit and took his own life. It's rough trying to think that maybe I could have said something, maybe not. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe if I did say something, he wouldn't have done that. Who knows?
How many times we've all heard those stories, like I was going home to kill myself and someone stopped me, or, I kind of ran into someone maybe I hadn't talked to in a long time, and they kind of lightened my day up. But we've all had those stories, like that person was going home to end their life and something had kind of, who knows what it was, maybe it was obviously somebody had to recognize, or somebody was just ran into them out of luck, but maybe it was some kind of calling, and they were able to make a difference and, extend that person's life and make, change their whole direction.
Yeah, I think that's big, because it may seem like nothing to us to just reach out and be like, hey, dude, how's it going? Like, you look off today. I'm worried about you. It's something as simple as that. Like, it takes no effort. Something like that, it might just save a life, and it takes no time at all, no effort. And if it could save one life and we do it 1,000 times, it's worth it. You know what I mean? It's such a small gesture, but not enough people practice it. I've been guilty of not doing it too. Like I said, I've had friends who took their own life or even attempted to take their own life, and the signs were there and I just didn't see it. I played it off as like, oh, you're just having a bad day. I have bad days, and sometimes when I have a bad day, I don't want to talk to people and I avoid people.
Right. And you never know, because whether it's, Robin Williams, these happy people that you just, some people don't even have the signs. They don't show it in public, and they're putting on this face. They're laughing all the time, like, oh, he's so fun to be around. He's so happy all the time. And all of a sudden, we see these people in the news, whether it's a celebrity or whether it is someone close to us, and they end it. But some of these people, they put on a face and you don't even recognize it. Like that guy was so happy. He seemed so happy. He seemed like he was enjoying his life.
But is it a persona that he's putting on for the public or the media or something like that? And I think that
perhaps,
maybe I don't know his story or his background a whole lot, but maybe like his close friends, maybe they saw something. Maybe there were signs or symptoms that they saw that we didn't, because we see what's behind the camera. Unfortunately, none of us knew Robin Williams, unless you guys did. I don't know that.
I did not.
Unfortunately, me neither.
Yeah. So none of us knew Robin Williams, but like maybe, just maybe behind the scenes, there were things and there were signs, and who knows?
Right. And there's people we work with all the time that they come to work and they put this face on, but
exactly
when they get home, they might be having, a difficult marriage or something like that too. So it, in a micro lens, it could be kind of the same situation, but.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I think, and so that's the thing about these jobs that, as brothers and sisters that work with us, like that's why we get to know who we work with, and why not ask questions? Like, we're all of us are nosy at heart, because what's the first thing you do when you see some sort of like tragedy on the news? You're like, oh, I need to read that. I got to figure out what the heck's going on, right? Like, I need to know the details. We see, some sort of breaking news, dun, 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 and the first thing we do is click on it because we're like, oh, I got to know it. It's breaking news. Like, come on. So why don't we take the same approach with our friends? Why not ask them questions? Why not get to know them, understand them? And if we do that, a lot of times they're probably going to be more apt to be open with us. And if they're open with us, a lot of times we're going to understand when there are issues going on. And when there are issues going on, we can even open up the dialogue even more.
Yeah.
And that's when you can really get to know somebody. You can really find those issues. And then they're probably going to be more apt to say, hey, man, I'm just not feeling it today. Like things are, like, dude, I'm hurting and I need help.
Yeah. So I could connect this with education a little bit, and policing is, you could kind of connect those same things with policing as well. You have to get to know these people first. If you never get to build a relationship with them, if you never get to know them, then there's no depth there. There's you're not going to learn about them. You're not going to understand what they're dealing with. But if you spend some time and you build those relationships, whether it's a student, whether it's someone on the streets, whether it is a friend of yours that's dealing with depression or mental illness, if you actually spend time, build that relationship with them and get to know them, you understand what they're dealing with. You understand what they're going through, and we could get those people help, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's on the streets, whether it is a friend.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a super good point, man. Getting to know people is huge, man. I'm kind of a nosy dude when I'm at work, so I ask a ton of questions. I love talking with people. When I'm at work, now in my personal life, I'm not a huge talker. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm a pretty loner dude. When I go out, I'm usually pretty closed off. Just because when I'm not at work, I just want to be me, man. I just want to be a dad. I just want to be a husband. I don't want to like have to do work kind of stuff. But when I'm at work, I kind of have to flip a switch, like you're talking about, Eric. You need to flip that switch, whether it be call to call, or it's just when you go from being your home life, being dad and a husband, to cop, or a wife and then cop. I flip that switch. And so when I get to work, anybody that I talk to or that I encounter on the street is an opportunity for me to learn. And so I like to ask questions, like I come across a lot of people who are homeless. I love to find out, like, what is their story? Like, how did you become homeless? Like, what led you to like living right here on this curb, because there's some crazy stories out there, like some insanely interesting things that have happened to people, and it does nothing but help us within this job if we get to know the people that we're working with, whether that's a homeless guy who lives on the street, or, it's a gang member, or it's just somebody who's having a bad day. Get to know them, like take that opportunity instead of just looking at it as, hey, I need to hurry up and get through this call. Take it as an opportunity to, one, let them understand what you're there for and what your purpose is, but let them know that you care too, and that you're not just there to get the information you need and to leave. Take the time to maybe educate them on some things, because sometimes they have questions for you that maybe have no relation to what you're there for, but it's just such a great opportunity to bridge a small gap between the community and the police. So I try to use my job as a way to bridge that gap as often as I can. So every chance I get to talk with somebody, I usually try to take that opportunity and just either get educated on, different things, like why people become homeless, or why it is that they got so addicted to the drug that they're addicted to. Why is it that they decided that they needed to join a gang? What led them to that? And those things, they pique my interest a lot. And so I'm constantly asking questions about that kind of stuff, because it does nothing but help me within my job. So I think that that's one of the things that first responders need to do a little bit better job of, is just asking questions, man. You can do that. I mean, it's going to translate over to not just asking questions to the people we work for, which is our community, but ask questions of the people we work with, our brothers and sisters, and within our job. Get to know them, get to know, what they're like when they're normal, what they're like when they're not normal. That way, when they're having a bad day, we can try and work through it together. Yeah,
I think that's honestly why first responder jobs are so tough. And it's these professions that you have to always put on this face and be professional and be the most courteous person you can be. And that's why whenever someone has a bad run-in with law enforcement, whether it's just, it is that burglary report and, you kind of stand off to that person just because yourself is having a bad day. But maybe that's the only time they're ever going to have contact with law enforcement. And that's going to just change their perception. But the sad thing is that they're not going to know that you were having a bad day because you're doing your duty. And it's just kind of crazy to me that they'll never kind of understand it, because it kind of seems like people think that cops are these robots and they're kind of programmed to do just one thing, and they want you to solve their problems right then and right now. But they don't really think about the person who's, wearing the uniform and who they are at home, basically, I guess you would say.
I think that's one of the huge responsibilities that community relations units have within a police department is they have that unique opportunity to be able to explain all of that. So as a normal patrol cop, you probably don't get the opportunity to sit and explain why you're having a bad day or why you're maybe a tad rude or something like that to somebody that you're there to talk to. But I think it's incumbent upon a community relations unit to be able to bridge that gap and to say, hey, well, you don't understand what he just went to. You know, maybe he just got done dealing with a 3-year-old who drowned, you know, and then your call was the very next call he went to. So maybe in his mind, it wasn't the most important thing that happened that day, because you never know. Does that cop have a 3-year-old at home? Did he think about his 3-year-old when he saw that 3-year-old that had just drowned? You know, we're all human. We all have human tendencies, and what we do is we relate things to ourselves. And I can tell you this because I on my son's 5th birthday, a 5-year-old was shot and killed, and I went to that call and I saw that 5-year-old who died. I also went to a 3-year-old who had been shot and killed, and one of my other sons was 3 years old at the time, and I performed CPR on that 3-year-old. And the entire time I performed CPR on the 3-year-old, I saw my son's face. So we're human. That's the kind of things that happen to us. We attribute the things that we see with our own life. We look at them and we see, yeah, it's a 3-year-old that I've never met before in my life. However, I treated him like I treat my 3-year-old, because when I looked at him, I saw my son's face. When I carried him down some stairs, when I carried him into an ambulance, knowing full well that he probably wasn't going to make it, it bothered me. I was upset. When I got home, I cried. Like I was super emotional at the time. I came home, you know, I got ordered to come home because I just wasn't in the right state of mind to continue working. I had worked 18, 20 hour shift at that point. And I got home, and the only thing I wanted to do was hold my 3-year-old. And so I came home, you know, I probably drank a beer or two, and then I jumped in bed with my 3-year-old and I held him all night, you know. And that's the kind of things that, you know, you don't get to convey to the public, because they just don't. It's not our jobs to do that as a patrol cop when we're out there and we're talking with people. Our job is to be on our A game at all times, and we have to. That's what people expect of us, and that's our job. And so, you know, for the most part, we do that. But those cops and those units, like the community relations units, it's incumbent upon them to fill that gap where we can explain things in real time when it happens. You know, those units have to go out there and say, hey, look, you don't understand the things that we have to deal with and the things that we have to see on a day-to-day basis. So here's just a tad, here's a little taste of the things that we see, you know. So maybe, just maybe, your call wasn't the most important thing that day. It may have been the most important thing to you that day, but it wasn't the most important thing that was happening in the city, you know, that day. So, and a lot of times they step back and they go, holy smokes, like, had no clue. You know, they just assume, you know, something different, like, you know, whatever it was that they assumed. You know, they don't think about all the things that happen within a city on any given day. And I think those units have a unique responsibility to be able to convey the message that most first responders don't get to convey on a call-to-call basis.
Yeah, I mean, you have a great point in that whole, you know, your story, whatever. It's, can people, and people should put themselves in other people's shoes. If people could have empathy and really kind of take a moment to, okay, what is that person thinking? What did they go through? So putting yourself in other people's shoes, number one, understanding and listening to people, and just having empathy for whether it's a police officer, whether it is a victim, you know, whatever it is, right? If people could do that on both sides, we could, our whole world would be different, right?
Oh, yeah.
But that's the challenge of pitting, you know, allowing people to think in a different mindset and pit themselves in other people's shoes and have empathy for other people.
Yeah, dude, I think you make a good point. Having empathy, but that goes both ways. So us having empathy for victims is huge. they don't see that side of officers very often, because a lot of times officers go to calls and they feel this responsibility to go there and be a robot and to take the information that they're supposed to take and then to do whatever it is that they have to do. Whereas that they could have done the exact same thing and show a little empathy. And it goes a long, long way. Just being able to say, hey, I understand what you're going through. You know, whether it's a child custody thing and maybe you've dealt with child custody in the past and say, hey, I get it, man. I've been there. You know, that's huge. It lets them know that you're human, because a lot of people look at first responders, especially law enforcement, and they look at us as like these like robots that were programmed to protect and serve, you know, and it's not the case. Like we're all normal people. And if you can show a little empathy, a lot of times it goes a long way. And on the flip side to that, you know, like, I don't know if it's necessarily the public's job to show empathy for police officers, you know, because a lot of times police officers don't give people the opportunity to show empathy, because we don't show that like vulnerability or that like weakness side of things, because that's just not our job. We're there to do something, and, you know, we're there to do what we got to do, and then we got to go on to the next thing we have to do. So we don't get that opportunity necessarily to have that dialogue and to show people that, hey, like, you know, I'm normal too. But I think that that's a big part of law enforcement, is being able to show some empathy and letting them know, like, hey, like, we're normal. We have issues too, man. We've dealt with things, and we're not much different, you know?
So kind of going into that, I guess I'd say you're on this call hypothetically, and you're going there, and maybe it's, you know, just something that's not going to like raise your awareness to a certain standard, but then things escalate. And we talk about, obviously in the media right now, we see a lot of shootings going on. So maybe you're on this call, and the next thing you know, you see this guy kind of nervous or something like that. Just for hypothetical scenario. How do you go about just being on your A game, like just being aware? Officer safety, I guess, is kind of where I'm going at with this. Obviously, you said you have your own business and you do firearms training for other people. How do you incorporate that? And how do you train for an everyday, even just a normal call?
Well, I think that you have to be ready for any situation on any call, because any call can turn chaotic at any given time. It doesn't matter what the nature of the call is. You know, the most, you know, chill call, you could look at a call and say, oh, okay, I'm going to go knock this out real quick. You know, it might be some like super, super chill call, whatever it may be. Maybe it's just like a report of a, you know, stolen, you know, some sort of stolen property call, or like a theft report or something like that. And it seems like it's going to be a super chill call, but that call could turn super violent at a moment's notice. And you just kind of have to always be ready for it. A lot of times when you see bad things happen with officers, I mean, I don't know. I don't ever really Monday morning quarterback officers or their decisions in situations, because I don't know what their state of mind was or anything. But what I will say is that for me personally, I try to stay pretty hyper vigilant. I always try to stay pretty situationally aware whenever I'm at any call. I always think worst case scenario, like if this was to go to the worst case scenario, how would I react? I think that's a big thing, is just being able to stay situationally aware, be confident in your ability, and just be ready for anything. Like, understand that not every problem or situation is going to require a gun. Not every problem or situation is going to require a taser or a baton or your fists. And a lot of that comes back to confidence and training. It's like I talked about, man, training is the biggest thing. And if we can train our officers more, we're probably going to get a lot better decisions. We're probably going to get a lot less of those bad decisions, but it all comes back to training.
So talking about that training, like you said, you have your own business, Jeffries Firearms Training. How do you go about that? You're obviously, for the most part, you're training normal civilians. Obviously, I see you do women's classes as well. What does that training entail? And what do you tell a normal civilian that maybe, obviously, cops aren't going to be there immediately? So like a burglary in progress there at home, or it turns into a robbery. What do you tell those individuals that you train, and what do you train in particular?
Yeah, so I own Jeffries Firearms Training, and I do firearms training, and I do that from like basic, like introductory level classes all the way up to like tactical level classes for people who want to do some, you know, a little bit more like run and gun type stuff.
And we actually got to see one of your classes today. Which is awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So we do, like I said, today was an introductory level class, but we do everything up to, like I said, tactical level classes. And what I try to do in my classes, I try to give people as much information as I can within the allotted time that I'm given in that particular class. So, and most of my classes are about like 4 hours right now. Some of my higher level classes are like 8 hours. But the introductory level stuff is what I do is I give them a basic foundation of what firearms is all about. Understanding the components of a firearm. We break it down to very basic stuff, components of a firearm, the fundamentals of shooting, whether that's like how to stand, how to hold a gun, what you're looking at, how to manipulate the firearm, all that stuff, whether it be loading it, firing it, all that stuff. So we try to cover a plethora of information within a short amount of time. And we've had a ton of positive feedback on our classes. Things have been going really good. We try to educate people on home defense, educate them on what it is to defend your home, how to defend your home, legal considerations, all that kind of stuff. We try to give as much information as we can in a short amount of time, while also teaching them how to shoot a gun and how, for some people, they've never shot guns before coming to the class. And so the first thing is like how not to be scared of shooting a gun. So, that's one of the things we have to cover with some people. And I've had so much fun teaching these classes, being able to help educate some people. And in every class that I teach, I learn just as much as I'm teaching, because I'd like to think that if I wasn't in law enforcement, I'd probably be like in teaching or some sort of education, because I love watching people grow and watching them learn and feeling like I had some sort of influence on that. It's like one of the most fulfilling things you can have, I think, as a person, is like being able to influence somebody and to potentially get them more involved in a certain aspect of things. So I think what we try to do is we do our best to educate people, not just how to shoot a gun, not just how to handle a gun, but to be responsible, trained, and to understand that, like, just because you have a gun doesn't mean you're armed. Understanding that mindset is one of the most key components to any sort of training, regardless, like if it's firearms or if it's self-defense, whatever it may be. But mindset is, man, that's number one. It really is. If you don't have the right mindset, you're already going to be fighting a losing battle. So that's one of the things that we really push in our training. I've been fortunate to be able to train with a lot of good people and to be able to collaborate with people and to be able to learn from them, and then to take the things that I've learned and convey that message to others.
So I guess kind of tying into that, I kind of want to ask you kind of a question, maybe a scenario type question. So how do you go about those? Because obviously there's a lot of individuals who do not like guns. There's, first and foremost, that's obviously a huge majority of people. I don't want to say majority, but there's a good part of the country that does not like guns. What do you tell those individuals that they should exercise their Second Amendment right? Like, how do you go about that?
Ooh, that's a tough question. So how do I tell people who don't like firearms that they should exercise their Second Amendment right? I would say that is probably one of those things it's tough, but I think that's a gap that we can bridge just with some education. Understand that, like, guns aren't these like weapons of terror or death. Like, shooting guns can be just a ton of fun. Like, it doesn't have to be something that you're doing for any specific reason, like home defense or anything like that. Sometimes you can just go out and shoot to be like a stress reliever. It's a ton of fun. Like, shooting like a can or like a 2-liter of soda, it's a ton of fun. It doesn't have to be something that is looked at as like a negative thing. And I think that that's like one of the issues that we see with a lot of people that want to, get rid of guns and stuff. They see these guns as some sort of like instrument of death. And anything put in the hands of the wrong person could be an instrument of death or an instrument of destruction. Not just guns. A computer put in the hands of the wrong person could be an instrument of destruction. Anything. So a cell phone, why don't, nobody wants to fight to get rid of cell phones or computers. So why is it that guns are this like, so dangerous instrument? I would say that like identity theft probably hits more people, and it probably hits them probably a lot harder than a gun ever has. You know, I doubt that the majority of people in this world have, you know, like, I don't know what the percentage of people in this world have been shot, but I would say that there's probably a higher percentage of people who've had identity theft, you know, or some sort of hacking to, like, whether that's a social media site or an email address or a credit card or whatever that may be. I would think that the percentage would be higher than percentage of people who've been shot in this country. So I would say that these things can cause just as much damage to a person's life, you know, because a lot of that, I mean, sometimes people don't ever recover from identity theft or some sort of hacking incident or something like that. So I think that electronics can be just as dangerous as a firearm can, put in the hands of the wrong person. But if we can educate those people and let them know that and understand that, like, not everybody that's carrying a gun is doing it for some sort of malicious reason. Some of us just want to exercise the rights that we are given by our founding fathers. And a lot of times, like, the people that I've encountered who have been of the opinion that we shouldn't have guns or that we shouldn't have certain guns, when I take them out shooting, they almost always change their opinion because they're like, wow, this is a ton of fun. And I said, yeah, that's what the majority of people who enjoy guns think. It's not that we want to have them so we can go on some sort of, like, you know, like, crime spree. It's because we enjoy them. Like, we have a lot of fun, you know, whether that's going out and just doing, like, sport shooting or competitive shooting or, like, hunting, you know, like going out and, you know, getting a deer or, you know, like ducks or whatever it is, you know, your thing is just being able to educate people. I think that's the big thing is, and like I said, that's incumbent upon us as trained, responsible gun handlers to be able to educate the people who don't like them. You know, now there's some people that you're just not going to reach. There's some people that no matter what you tell them, what you show them, they're just not going to be on the same wavelength. And hey, you know what? Whatever. It is what it is. You know, there's some people you can't reach. But I think education's a big thing, man. It's just like policing. You got to be able to bridge that gap somehow.
Right.
The gap usually is uneducation. You know, they're uneducated in whatever topic it is. And so they just spit out information that they know nothing about. So if we can educate them, you know, a lot of times you can bridge that gap.
Someone that has a gun, right? What would you tell them? I know there's kind of the force, you know, safety mechanisms and things you kind of follow. What would be those kind of rules that you would tell someone, this is definitely what you need to do? If you have a gun, you absolutely need to follow these rules to be safe, not only for yourself, but also for the people around you.
Yeah, man, that's good. So in my basic classes, my introductory level classes, what I cover, first thing I cover, very first slide of my presentation is the firearm safety rules, man. Those are key. And if you follow those, you'll be safe in every situation you find yourself. You know, so you have to be able to follow those rules in order to take any class, any sort of firearms training class or anything like that. They're going to, I would imagine, at least every firearms training class that I've been to, any reputable firearms training class is going to cover the firearm safety rules. It's just what, you know, it's how we do business, whether that's the introductory level classes or some like really cool John Wick stuff. You know what I mean? Like that running and gunning stuff that everybody wants to do. You're going to cover the firearm safety rules. We always cover the basics because shooting is nothing but the basics. I like to think that there's no such thing as advanced shooting. It's just doing the basics at a really high level. That's all it is. Because the fundamentals are the fundamentals. There's no basic fundamentals and advanced fundamentals. There's just fundamentals. That's it. And if you can do those really well, you're probably going to shoot really well. So that's why I'm not of the opinion of advanced shooting. I don't believe in it. What I believe in is I think there's people who are really, really good at doing basic things with shooting. And those firearm safety rules are the most basic thing in shooting. Whether that's treat all guns as they're loaded, keeping your finger outside of the trigger guard until you've made the conscious decision to fire and your sights are on target. You know, never letting the muzzle cover anything that you're not willing to shoot or destroy. And then knowing your target, knowing your backdrop, and knowing what's between you and your target. And if you have a manual safety, you know, obviously manipulate the manual safety when you're not using your firearm. And those are given in different orders and stuff like that. As long as you follow them, that's the key thing, is understanding if you follow those. And a lot of times if you follow the first one, treat all guns as they're loaded, then you're probably going to follow 2 and 3, because I would hope that with a loaded gun, you wouldn't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire and your sights are on target. And I would hope that you wouldn't point it at anybody that you're not willing to shoot or destroy. So if you follow 1, you're probably going to follow 2 and 3. If you're a logical person, 4 and 5 are a little bit different. And it's usually just the 4 firearm safety rules. We add 5 if you have a gun that has a manual safety, activate the manual safety if you're not using it.
Yeah. And I think situational awareness. So say you have a gun in your house, right? And you're protecting yourself, home defense, having the awareness that whether maybe you're in an apartment building, whatever it is, right? Like that bullet's going to travel through a wall. Like, so understand there's someone else probably behind that wall. Maybe it's your kids, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it is whatever it is, having that understanding of your situational awareness.
Yeah, man, that's huge. So that's what I tell people is I say, man, just because you have a gun doesn't mean you're armed. And I think the mind is the ultimate weapon, and using that mind to remember those firearm safety rules and to apply those at a time of need is huge. If somebody breaks in your house and, for whatever reason, you feel an imminent threat to your life or your safety and you feel the need to use lethal force, understand that if you miss, that bullet just doesn't stop if it doesn't hit at its intended target. Most houses are made of drywall and wood, and bullets just don't stop. So what's on the other side of that bad guy or that bad girl? Is it going to be your kid's bedroom? Your kid's bed? So those are things you got to consider, and physiologically when we're under stress, we don't typically, our fine motor skills aren't at their peak. So with firearms, we have to be able to operate firearms at a high level. We have to be able to do that almost subconsciously. And if we can't, then a lot of our situational awareness is going to go out the window because it's hard for individuals to multitask. What I urge my students is we need to get them to a level where operating a firearm is done at a subconscious level, especially with good fundamentals, sound judgment. That way, when things are really chaotic, they can focus on other stuff because, they may have kids running around their house. They may have, spouses or other people. And there's a lot of other things going on. Situations are super dynamic. People are moving, people are running, and we got to be able to make good, sound decisions in those chaotic situations to make sure we don't make the wrong decision.
What's the difference between your trainings between your academies to where you're going to have these young police officers who are, going to go to calls and have a gun on them at all times, even, off duty, compared to your civilian classes? What are some different characteristics in your classes that you kind of instruct to those individuals?
Well, when I instruct aspiring police officers, we have to instruct them on policy, procedure, things of that nature, how to handle a firearm, situations when you may need your firearm, how to use it for de-escalation purposes. There's a lot of things that you can do with a firearm that actually require you to never discharge that firearm. And if you can do that, then, man, more power to you. If you can be able to solve a situation by de-escalation, that's the big thing right now. But when I train civilians, it's completely different because a lot of these men and women aren't going to be carrying a gun on them 24 hours a day. Whereas police officers, chances are, if they're not on duty, they're probably still going to be carrying a gun on them. So I have to be able to educate them on how to carry that gun almost 24 hours a day, whether it's on duty or off duty, how to be hypervigilant, what things to look for, what things to do. And with civilians, a lot of them are just looking to understand how to manipulate a firearm, how to be comfortable with firearms. That's the majority of the students that I get on the civilian side of things. They just want to understand how to be comfortable with guns. They don't necessarily care about, bullseye shooting or being super accurate or being super fast or anything like that. So I would say that that's the main difference is with police officers, I'm training them to carry guns on them dang near 24 hours a day. And with civilians, it's, maybe in your time of need or just to be comfortable with them, if their loved one has one in the house.
How does a law enforcement officer conduct themselves out in public as far as, obviously, you're normal people just like me. how do you go about, having dinner with your family? Is there certain things you keep in your mind? Do you have like a checklist you go through? Is there things you do that just kind of, just for your own safety? Because obviously there's a huge possibility because you live within the city that you police. So how do you conduct yourself? Maybe you run into someone you've arrested before. That they're a felon. How do you, act in public?
I don't feel like I act any different in public. When I'm at home, I'm fairly, I don't know, I guess I'm fairly normal. When I go out in the public, I'm not a big talker, and I'm not a big talker like at home either. I'm not like somebody who's like super outgoing and like always is, throwing on big long conversations or anything. But when I go out in public, I'm probably about the same. Do I take any steps to maybe put myself in a position of advantage if something was to happen? Yeah, I do that. I probably sit with my back to a wall to where I can see like entryways and exits, and there's some other things that I take into consideration when I go out in public. But I don't think that that's like something that's like across the board for law enforcement or first responders. I think that it's just on a person to person basis. I don't think that everybody does it. It's just, I do it maybe because of my level of training and because I always feel that I want to be an asset and not a liability. And that if something was to happen, I want to be able to help. So I want to have some sort of awareness as to what's going on in my little tiny world that I'm in.
So Ronnie, as we end the show, there's throughout the country, I've heard some statistics in Houston Police Department, different police departments, that there is a decline in police officers coming into academies and applications. So, what I would say is, what advice would you give for the future generation of people wanting to go into law enforcement and also new police officers?
I would say if it's something you're truly passionate about, don't let anything stand in your way. Don't let any negative attention or negative information stop you from doing something that you truly want to pursue. If it's truly your love and your passion and something that you feel like you were born to do, then like go forth and conquer. Like, this job needs good people. It needs people who want this job. And the more good-hearted people we can get into this job, the better we're going to be. There's no shortage of crime, and we're never gonna deter crime completely. That's just unrealistic. The more good people we can get here, the better we can be as a department. The more people that are passionate about what they do in this profession are going to do nothing but help us bridge that gap between us and the community, and potentially get policing back seen in a positive light by all sides. Right now, obviously, policing is looked at negatively by some, and some of it is understandable. I understand why some people look negatively at policing. I get it. Now, that doesn't mean that all law enforcement is bad. I get that some people look at a certain situation and they paint with a broad stroke, and they say that all law enforcement is bad because this happened. Now, that's not true, and all good law enforcement people know that. But I would say that, especially for these younger officers and people that are aspiring to be police officers, don't let the negative attention deter you. Understand that there's a lot of good in this job, and understand that there's a lot of good people that love you, love this job, and that will make this job 100% worth it. You're going to see some of the worst things you've ever seen in your life, but you're also going to see some of the coolest, most awesome things you've ever seen in your life. You're going to be able to change people's life for the better. You may be that one person who saves that one life. And if you save one life in a 30-year career, that career was worth it. It was 100% worth it. So don't let any of the negative attention deter you from something that you're truly passionate about. And like I said, all law enforcement is ready, willing, and able to hire good-hearted people that really are truly passionate about the job.
It's awesome. And like you said, we need the best, and we need people to join law enforcement agencies. So that's great advice. So we do have a segment on the Freedom First podcast called the Freedom Fighter of the Week. This is someone that has been influential in your life, has helped you get to where you are. Ronnie, who is your Freedom Fighter of the Week and has been influential in your life?
Oh, man, that's tough. I'm going to have to, jump on the sword here, and I'm going to have to say my wife. She has been the most important person in my life, and we've known each other since we were 12, and, things took us apart when we were young, but we reconnected, and we got married, and we have 4 beautiful children. Man, she is the coolest chick on the planet. She has helped me in more ways than I can ever explain. And she lets me get away with buying a bunch of stuff, including guns that I don't need, but I want, And she lets me start businesses. She's done nothing but support me in me starting my business and me pursuing dreams and careers that, definitely aren't super awesome for family life, or jobs within those careers. But she's done nothing but be supportive, and I am super, super thankful for that. She's probably one of the most hardworking women I've ever met, whether that's at her day job or as a mom. She is truly a freaking rock star. And so she definitely had to be my Freedom Fighter of the Week, 100%.
Shout out Luella Jeffries.
That was very evident today when we were, at your firearm training class. She was taking photos. She was picking up brass and unloading the truck, loading the truck up. So that's awesome.
Yeah, she's a beast, man. She does everything and then some. And she asks for very, very little in return. She truly is a pretty awesome chick.
How do you have people reach you? So obviously with your business, how do you go about it? Do you have an Instagram, email? Throw all that out there.
Yeah. So Instagram, I am at Jeffries Firearm Training, super, super awesome. It took a lot of thought to come up with that name.
One of our sponsors.
Yes, sir.
Shout out JFT.
Yeah. Shooters making shooters. On Facebook, I'm just Ronnie Jeffries. And on email, it's just Jeffries Firearms Training at gmail.com. You can reach me at any of those if you guys are looking for training, whether that's introductory level training all the way to, some tactical type stuff. We try to cover it all. I have some really awesome people that work with me. I don't like to say for me because they work with me. It's definitely not something that's just me. All the people that I work with are my partners. They're not, subordinates. That's not how I look at people that work with me. I've been fortunate to have some awesome training, and I try to take that training and give that knowledge that I've learned to other people.
So what do you need to have for your class? I guess, do you need to have your own gun? Do you need to have ammo? What are kind of those things that you bring along whenever you go to one of your classes? Yeah.
So the things that we have that we ask people to bring is we have them bring ammo. They bring whatever gun that is that they're going to have. We would like for them to bring their own gun because we want them to be comfortable with whatever it is that they're going to have in their house. So they bring their gun, they bring ammo. We have them bring eye protection, ear protection, a chair, just some things to make it a little bit more comfortable, some water and whatnot.
All right. So I think I speak for me and Blaine both that we thank you for your service, obviously, as an Army veteran. We thank you for your service every day as a police officer, and we are extremely grateful for having you on. So,
yeah, Ronnie, thank you for what you do. And, this conversation, I think will get out to a lot of people and, connect with the community. And we appreciate what you do every day, and we thank you for coming on the Freedom First podcast.
Yeah, man, I've had a ton of fun. If I could, I'd like to give a little shout out to a few of my homies, if that's
do it.
Okay.
Of course, yeah.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so super pumped to have done this podcast. I am super honored that you guys chose me to come on here. While I have a couple seconds, I just want to give a huge shout out to not only some of the guys who've helped me get to where I'm at, but some of the companies who have helped to push me in a direction that I never thought I could get to. First off, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Mike Levy on Instagram. He goes as Knockout Lights. He is one of the biggest influencers that I've had in the last few years, especially with starting my company and learning some of this good tactical stuff and becoming a little bit more known on social media. Secondly, Kawa on social media. He's known as 2 Alpha to Quit. He is a phenomenal man and a great person to work with. Does nothing but try to help other people get better at what they do. Same with Mike. Another one is Eric Rainwater On Instagram, he is Mullet Operandi. He is a awesome dude, just full of life, always the life of the party. Great dude, and a ton of fun to work with. Chandler Rossman always has the best hair around. That guy is awesome, great trainer, and definitely knows what he's doing. Jerry Perez, he is also law enforcement, just a phenomenal human being, always looking to better those around him and to inspire people to do better. Great dude. Also, Arturo Guzman, he is also law enforcement down in Central California, doing great things. Mitch Durst, he is local EMS, doing awesome things, great human being. Ryan Clark, one of my better friends, great human being, biggest heart in the world. One of the coolest dudes I could ever ask to have met, and one of the guys who helps me with my company do some co-instructing. Travis Kennedy, former Navy SEAL, just a phenomenal human being and a badass dude. Does some great training, and he's given me some great advice. Great dudes. I've had nothing but phenomenal experiences with them. Also, there's one other person that I'd love to give a shout out to. He goes by the Operational Athlete. He is a phenomenal human being and just a great dude. His name's Matt, and former Green Beret, just a badass dude. On Instagram, like I said, he goes by the Operational Athlete. Huge following, great dude. Some of the companies who've helped me get to where I'm at now, and some of the companies who I highly recommend if you're looking for gear in the tactical community, UF Pro Tactical Clothing, phenomenal company. In my opinion, they're making the best tactical gear out there as far as clothing is concerned. Just super awesome stuff. It is breathable. It is super comfortable. I've been using it the whole time that I've been with the PD and the SWAT team, and I've loved every minute of it. It's just great clothing, and I haven't had any issues. Defender Armor, some of the lightest stuff out there, some of the most ergonomic armor out there. It fits great, it feels great, and it's super light. It offers phenomenal protection. Solomon boots and shoes, they are phenomenal footwear that is super comfortable and lasts quite a long time. US Elite Gear that helps to sell several different brands of clothing. They have some of the best brands out there, and they are one of the best companies out there, founded by a disabled veteran and a cause that's super awesome to promote. I love the company, and I'm proud to work with them. Gators Eyewear, super awesome eye protection. If you guys are looking for eye protection, look no further than Gators Eyewear. They have all kinds of stuff, whether it be for shooting eye protection or just some stuff that looks awesome while you're out and about. They are phenomenal eyewear. And then NAG Industries, another local company that I work with. Good dude, great owner, and he looks out for people that he knows. Give those guys a look if you're looking for tactical stuff. Anything in the industry, look no further than those companies.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you
thanks,
for
guys.
listening to the Freedom First podcast. Please subscribe and give us your honest rating on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Let freedom ring.